that would help. I'd like to call to order the October 8th Open Space Board of Trustees meeting, and we'll start with a roll call. So,
Sarah Glenn, present.
John,
Present.
Michelle,
Here.
and I'm here as well. Let's see. Let me pull up the agenda. Sorry, you caught me a little unprepared. Sorry. So our first order of business, as usual, is the approval of the minutes. The minutes appear in the packet on the third page. Does anybody have any corrections to the first page of the minutes? I think we're gonna do that when we before we do public comment. We can do the minutes first. So, issues with page 1 of the minutes? Nope. Okay. Well, they were pretty short minutes. I think there were just 2. Oh no, there are 3. Second page of the minutes. Any changes, edits? Okay. Third page, last page of the minutes. Okay, looks like we have no changes. Thanks to Leah, who's not here tonight. So I'll take a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll motion that we approve the minutes from the September 10th, 2025 board meeting as written.
Take a second.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the September minutes by Carol, seconded by Estrella, and we can just do a thumbs vote on that. Okay, so passes 4-0. Okay, now I'll turn it over to Lauren Kilcoyne, if you don't mind, to handle the rules of decorum, and then we can open it up to public comment.
Great, thank you. Just let this share. The city has engaged with community members to co-create a vision for productive, meaningful, and inclusive civic conversations. This vision supports physical and emotional safety for community members, staff, and OSBT, as well as democracy for people of all ages, identities, lived experiences, and political perspectives. For more information about this vision and the community engagement process, please visit the link below. The city will enforce the rules of decorum found in the Boulder Revised Code, including participants are required to sign up to speak using the name they are commonly known by, and individuals must display their whole name before being allowed to speak online. Currently, only audio testimony is permitted online. No attendee shall disrupt, disturb, or otherwise impede the orderly conduct of any city meeting in a manner that obstructs the business of the meeting. This also includes failing to obey any lawful order of the presiding officer to leave the meeting room or refrain from addressing the board. Only one person at a time at the podium, unless an accommodation like an interpreter is required. All remarks and testimony shall be limited to matters related to city business. No standing in or otherwise blocking the aisles in violation of the fire code or in a way that obstructs the vision or audio of other audience members. No signs or flags shall be permitted in council chambers except for one sign held by a person measuring no more than 11 by 17 inches, which is held no higher than the person's face. No participant shall make threats or use other forms of intimidation against any person. We ask that you not affix items to the podium or dais or walls or other surfaces of the chamber. Signs, flags, or other items used to communicate must be held by one person when displayed. Obscenity, other epithets based on race, gender, or religion, and other speech and behavior that disrupts or otherwise impedes the meeting will not be tolerated. In-person participants are asked to refrain from expressing support or disagreement verbally or with sounds such as applause or snapping, with the exception of declarations. Traditionally, support is shown through American Sign Language applause or jazz hands. If you're joining in person and would like to speak during public comment or items identified for public hearing, please sign up at the table and we'll call you up to speak at the podium. If you are joining online, you can raise your hand to speak during public comment. You can do that using the raise hand icon or by clicking the participants icon, the 3 dots on the bottom right, and selecting raise hand. If folks are calling in over the phone, they can press *9 to raise their hand. And that is it.
Thanks, Lauren. Appreciate that. All right, so now we're going to entertain public comment. So this is the public's opportunity to address the board.
I just would like to mention, I tried to log into the Zoom link and it wouldn't go. It says the meeting ID is invalid. So if you don't have people, I don't know if it's just me, but if you don't have people online, I wonder if it's,
Let me just make sure that I'll send you the
And while Sam works on that, we do have 3 people signed up in advance to speak. The first 2 will be pooling time, Jan Burton and Joel Shop. And Jan will be speaking for 5 minutes. I'm sorry, it's Jan Burton and then Paula and Joel are pooling time. So it looks like Jan is online. Should I wait while you take a look at that until we call them up? All right. Okay, yeah, there are folks calling in online. Okay, so then Jan Burton will be first, followed by the pool of Joel and Paula. Okay, Jan, you should be able to speak.
Good evening, board.
Good
Can you-
evening, Jan.
How are y'all? Thank you for your
Good.
service. I've got an update on my Trails Challenge. I'm 85% of the way through. And I did the South Boulder Peak on Sunday, which kicked my butt. And the good news is I saw a ranger on the way down, and I don't actually see that many rangers, so I was happy to see him. And he told me that if I complete this, I'll actually get a pin, which made me very happy. I want to talk about, I saw in the Boulder Daily Camera that the city is doing a controlled burn south of El Dorado Springs and west of 93. And you have plans to conduct burns through mid-November. And I believe that Matt Benjamin has told me this hasn't been done for 20 years. So I just want to say a great hooray. I think that is fantastic news. Well done. And I wanted to mention that I also saw an announcement from the county open space that at Hall Ranch, they are going to do a controlled burn, and they gave the date. But one thing that they also did, which I thought OSMP could do as well, they said there is a 5-year plan to treat 853 acres with a goal of 350 acres per year. I really like that as a resident and someone who puts my money into open space, is how are we going to protect all of the land that we have acquired over the years? And I'm a metrics-based person. I think we have something like 10,000 acres that are west of the Mesa Trail and kind of up against the city. So how many, I'd like to see a goal of how many acres we would do prescribed burns per year, and how long will that take us to achieve that? Is it a 5-year cycle, a 7-year cycle? What is it? I think that would be very beneficial in educating the public. I also I've dug through the entire city's budget and haven't found much money. That's not to say it's not there. I just couldn't find it for fuel mitigation, prescribed burning, that kind of thing. But I think it's also important for us as voters and residents and users of open space to know what would the cost be of doing this. So, just a real quick kind of assessment, and then a way to track the metrics of how we're doing against our goal. And with that, I'll let you get on with your meeting, and thank you very much for your service, and I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jan.
Next, we have Joel Shop and Paula Schuler, who are pooling time for 5 minutes.
Hi, my name is Paula Schuler. Since 2021, OSMP has been steadily working to remove prairie dogs from irrigated parcels. That work is paying off. Throughout the county. Sorry, Paula.
Do you mind turning your microphone on?
Oh, sorry about that. We'll restart your time also.
Okay. Do you want me to start over?
Yeah.
My name is Paula Schuler. Since 2021,
Isn't picking it
OSMP
up.
has been steadily working to remove prairie dogs from irrigated parcels. That work is paying off.
She's got it. Lauren's
Oh,
got it.
how about that? Again, start? Throughout the county, where prairie dogs have been removed, there's visible restoration progress and real improvements in land health on numerous agricultural parcels. But there's still a lot of work to be done. I'm here today ahead of your upcoming retreat to ask you to include prairie dog management in your retreat agenda and consider several specific actions that will make OSMP's management of prairie dogs more effective, efficient, and aligned with promoting the long-term health of OSMP lands. These 4 issues deserve discussion and warrant management policy change. 1, removing the seasonal moratorium on lethal control. 2, allowing burrow disturbance and lethal control on OSMP dry land, cropland. 3, evaluating the costs and benefits of OSMP's prairie dog barrier on all sides policy. 4, tracking and reporting annually the condition of OSMP's rangeland and grassland preserves with excessive prairie dog occupancy rates, with special attention to soil erosion and exotic weeds. 70% prairie dog occupation on grasslands is not acceptable. It is destructive. OSMP must develop a plan for lowering occupancy to the desired 10 to 26% level. Waiting for the plague is not the answer. OSMP needs to be more proactive, not reactive, in caring for these critical lands. Elizabeth Black sent you a detailed email regarding prairie dog management earlier this week. I'm in complete agreement with Elizabeth's email, and I hope you read and reference that email at your retreat. Tonight, I'd like to focus on removing the seasonal moratorium on lethal control. This is the issue I spoke to you about in February. I believe you all understand the issue. OSMP makes progress every year removing prairie dogs from irrigated parcels, but because of the moratorium, they have to stop removals from March 1 through May 31st. While prairie dogs reproduce, give birth, and typically produce 3 to 4 pups per litter. That's exponential growth. How does it make sense to pause removals when OSMP ends up killing more prairie dogs in the long run? According to staff, 2024 saw a massive explosion of prairie dogs across the OSMP system. Irrigated parcels experienced from 22% to 56% increase in prairie dog occupancy. Staff attributed that to a historically dry year. Spin it any way you want, but this weather might be the norm, not the exception because of climate change. Why take 3 steps forward only to take 5 steps back? In February, staff cited 2 reasons to maintain the moratorium, but I respectfully disagree. Temporary staffing limitations and a recommendation from the Prairie Dog Working Group. I urge OSMP to find a way to address the temporary staffing issue. Boulder County has managed to overcome similar staffing issues. The county removed their pupping moratorium in 2022, and they feel it has made a very positive difference in their management practices. The Prairie Dog Working Group was composed of primarily prairie dog advocates. Nobody likes killing, but let's be clear. This program is supposed to be about restoring agricultural lands, not promoting prairie dog expansion. It only makes sense to remove the moratorium and have the ability to manage the irrigated parcels 12 months of the year. The goal is to return these lands to agricultural viability, sequestering carbon and growing food and feed, and in the long run, killing as few prairie dogs as possible. The moratorium needs to be removed so that staff will have the discretion to manage prairie dogs all year long. Let's move forward. I'm asking OSBT to initiate real actions that make this policy change happen. Please include prairie dogs and agriculture in your agenda for the retreat. That's all I have for you.
Thank you, Paula.
Thank you.
There's nobody else signed up in person to speak. If there's anybody online who would like to speak, you can raise your hand. And if you're calling in over the phone, you can press *9. Okay, there's nobody else signed up to speak.
Okay, thanks. Then we're going to close public comment and move on to the next item on the agenda, which is matters from the board. So we have two things to talk about here in agenda item A, which I guess we can start with any feedback that anybody wants to give to what we heard with public comment. And if there's nothing there, we can talk about our written information item that we don't have a presentation on. Sarah, did you want something? You want to say something?
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
I really appreciated Jan Burton's comments, and I just wanted to name that. I know that we're making a strong effort internally to do more with numbers and reporting and data, and I thought Jan's report or request felt aligned with our vision and values and what I think we're already doing, moving towards and wanting to do more of. And it was a very concrete recommendation. So Jan, if you're still listening. And then I had you were there with me too, Harmon. We attended the Agriculture and Farming Appreciation Annual Lunch and got to meet all of the farmers that are currently working with Boulder Open Space. It was so awesome to attend. There were ranchers there in their cowboy hats, and I was trying to, recruit my son to go do some work, get some hard labor time out on the farms, and was successful. Actually, I got to take him out to herd some cattle this week, which he loved doing. I noticed that this prairie dog conversation did come up over lunch. It was sort of round robin style. We all picked up our plates and moved around and talked. And so I did pay attention when the email came in from Elizabeth Black. I was going to say Mary Black, but Elizabeth. And I'm assuming that everybody had time to read that. And I just wanted to acknowledge the amount of time and effort and thought that went into that, and also the presentation we hear here. And so we're going to talk about our agenda for the retreat, but I personally would not mind spending more time digging in on the question of how we can steward the land and think about the prairie dogs as well.
Anyone else? No. Okay.
Yeah, if I could just follow up a couple of things. You're absolutely right, Sarah. The city is working on developing a dashboard and a community tracking for all things wildfire resilience. Would cover prescribed burn in terms of being able to track successes and where we're at, as well as the storytelling behind and learning more about individual projects. So that's well underway. And will be, once complete, I think satisfy a lot of people's desires and needs in that regards. Regarding prescribed burn, actually, we have been putting fire on the ground over each year for a number of years. They have all been around up until about 6 years ago. 5 years ago was our last landscape level burn, but we do prescribed burns on our agricultural lands yearly. In fact, we did a number of them earlier this spring. So we are doing prescribed burns, but landscape level burns is something that the city really wants to accelerate on, which requires a landscape level prescribed burn plan. And so that is the first step, and that's about a 1.5 year process in which you take a unit, let's say 2,000 or 3,000 acres of your system, and you develop a very detailed burn plan around where are those units, and that has some goals in it as well as requirements that we have to meet in order to do those burns. And once the burn plan is done, then we're able to actually go and implement units of the burn plan. And so the one that's going to be that's planned for south of El Dorado Springs is within what is called the Flatirons Vista burn plan, and a unit within that. So yeah, we're really hoping to accelerate the program, and through the community dashboard and tracking process that is being developed, people can follow along with us. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. And I'm going to follow up a little bit too. So, Jan, I hope you're still listening. I'm a Jan Burton fan. I met Jan when she was on city council several years back, and happy to see that she's continuing to involve herself in local issues. Jan and I were talking a little while ago, and I talked with her about some of the things that we've learned on the land, where we've gone on field trips and talked with wildfire experts here at OSMP about things that we're doing to manage ladder fuels and to do wildfire management around the system. And she wasn't aware of a lot of the things that I told her that we now know about, or that maybe people who've been on the board longer than I have known about for a long time. And so it really does come back to being able to express what we're doing, tell the story, give out the metrics, so people who are interested, I think, can learn about it. And I think we're definitely accelerating the work that we're doing. So there will probably be a better story to tell as time goes on. So looking forward to that. And then the other piece, I think to respond to the direct request that we make Prairie Dogs a retreat item. I don't think that that's going to happen this year, unless everybody decides we should just throw that onto the retreat agenda. The retreat is, and we'll talk about this really soon, the retreat's going to be more of a traditional retreat where we're not going to go through 5 different functional areas where each one of the board members takes a functional area and tries to educate the other board members. This is an opportunity for us as a board to spend time talking about the dynamics of this board, how we work with staff, how we, are a conduit for community comment. But that's not to say that Prairie Dogs isn't a huge issue. I was at the Ag Tenants lunch too, and spoke to the people who do Prairie Dog management for OSMP as staff, and also spoke to ag users and tenants about the Prairie Dog issue. And I think that that's going to be something that does come up for us. We have multiple opportunities to talk about things that matter. Like tonight, we're going to do a water resources program update, so we understand how your ag water is getting delivered better. And so I do think that Prairie Dogs are a real important issue. We're going to get to them, but I just wanted to tell you we're about to talk to our retreat agenda, and I'm not planning on putting a specific technical item on Prairie Dogs into our retreat because of the type of retreat that we want to have. Yeah, go ahead,
I
Dan.
could add that for upcoming agenda items for you all, in December, we are planning to have a written item on our Prairie Dog management program. Then we'll have the community forum, which we would.
Every year, which
Every
we
year.
do.
And then that will be followed up in February by a Prairie Dog management item for the board in February. And I'd also say the retreat would be a time we tend to have a working lunch in which we identify potential agenda items for 2026 that you want to know more about, or that you want to see on the agenda, or you would like to have part of a field trip. And so if the will of the board is you want to learn and more and more input on Prairie Dog management, that certainly could be expressed through that agenda item at the retreat about, tell us more about your priorities for 2026.
Yeah, I would support all that, Dan. That's great. Thanks for the input. And also, we had talked about doing a field trip where we'd get to see some of the ag operations that we're supporting, and the tenants are managing in the county, out in our properties in the county. And we had talked about maybe doing that during irrigation season so we could see some of the actual work of irrigating fields while it's happening. And I think that would be probably a pretty good time to talk about Prairie Dogs too. So we could do ag water, irrigation, and Prairie Dog management all in the same field trip. Sound fun? Okay. All right. So the other thing in matters from the board, besides there's nothing for just general items. If anybody wanted to bring up something as a board member, this is the time. The other item is the written information, which we have a presentation for all the information in the packet except for the Parks and Wildlife non-motorized trail grant program applications. Does anybody have any comments about that written item? Dan, I just had a question about that one, about the South Mesa Trailhead. So if we were successful and got the grant for the South Mesa Trailhead, when would the work schedule start and finish dates for that likely be?
It would probably be in conjunction for a number of different reasons. It would be late 2025 into Q1 of 26 and
26.
Q1 of 2027.
Okay, so Marshall Mesa Trailhead done by
Oh,
then?
absolutely. Marshall Mesa would be completed. Yeah.
Okay, terrific, thanks. All right, so then the second item under matters from the board, I kind of hit it with my comments around the public comment. So, essentially the retreat subcommittee, Brady's not here. Brady's half of the retreat subcommittee. We had booked 20 minutes on the agenda tonight to actually talk about you know, what the retreat subcommittees come up with and the agenda. And, you know, I'm going to propose that we not use that time unless, you know, folks want to try to hammer out the agenda for the retreat. I'd rather wait for Brady to come back and just handle this offline with Dan. I think you know what we're aiming for this year, and I thought we had pretty good support for that. If we don't, happy to talk offline or talk right now. Okay.
That sounds great.
Okay, good. Then when Brady comes back, I'll put him into service, and I'll shame him appropriately for missing this meeting, and then we'll get you an agenda in advance of the meeting, and we'll work with Dan on that. So let's move on to matters from the department. Let me turn it over to Dan. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Harmon. Yeah, tonight is intentionally, a little bit intentionally and unintentionally, going to be focusing on our resource stewardship service area. We're going to talk about a program area that we really haven't daylighted to this board specifically, and that's on our wetland program area. And we have a number of a couple of different exciting projects that we've recently embarked on and that will continue on in the future that we felt deserve some time with you all. So Kat's going to be talking about that. That's going to be followed by our water resources program update. And then followed that by some innovative technology we're using to enhance our grazing and our prescribed and targeted grazing program. So that gives you a flavor for tonight. We're going to kind of run the gamut of a lot of our program areas under resource stewardship. But with that, Heather, are you going to say some opening remarks to get us started here?
Hello. Yeah, so I'm super excited tonight that we get to bring you some updates from a number of programs in our resource stewardship service area. Before we did that, though, I did want to introduce you to Brian Lieberman. Brian joined us back at the end of March as our ecological stewardship senior manager. So he oversees the wetland and riparian ecology program, the wildlife ecology program, and the grassland plant ecology program. So I just wanted to give him a minute to say hi to you all since he hasn't been in front of you before, and then he can introduce Kat and we can get started.
Thanks, Heather, and welcome, Brian.
Thank you. Yeah, it started in April and finally starting to learn some property names and where I'm at. And it's, yeah, it's been a really great place to be and work with. And my background is in open space from the town of Eagle, a much smaller program before this. And then I worked for a land trust in Crested Butte before that. So really excited to be here and it's nice to meet everybody. I'll turn it over to Kat. She's our senior wetland riparian ecologist, and I'll just let her take it from there. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Brian. So thank you for having me tonight. I'm really excited to share what we're working on in our program. And so if at any point you guys have questions, please feel free to raise your hands. I'm happy to answer them. There'll also be time at the end for questions or discussion. Next slide, please. So this evening, I'm going to give you an update on our program. And first, I'm going to talk about what our program is. And then I'm going to talk about how we work with other work groups within OSMP, as well as other city departments like utilities and planning and development services. And then we're going to talk about some specific wetland mitigation and restoration projects we've been working on. And then I'm really going to dive into a project we've been working on for the past 2 years that's funded by an EPA grant to complete wetland riparian mapping as well as wetland monitoring and assessment. And then we're going to switch gears and talk about our Boulder Creek restoration project, which is funded by an Army Corps of Engineer grant. So our program includes 2 full-time staff. That's myself and Jordan Swenson, our other wetland ecologist. We also had seasonal field technicians in 2024 and 2025, which were supported by an EPA grant. Next slide, please. So before we dive in, I want to go over the ecosystems we work in. So first, we work in wetlands, and there are 2 definitions that we work under. So there's ecological wetlands, which are areas with standing water or saturated soils during part of the growing season. And they're dominated by hydrophytic vegetation or water-loving plants. So those are 2 criteria. But regulatory wetlands must have 3 criteria, and that's having the hydrophytic vegetation, hydric soils, and surface water within 12 inches of the soil surface for at least 2 weeks of the growing season. And so that top right image shows you the landscape position of a wetland as well as some of the beneficial services they provide us. Then riparian areas are transitional zones along streams and rivers that are influenced by groundwater and shaped by the frequency, magnitude, and energy of floods. These areas can also be found around ponds and lakes. And so that middle diagram really shows you where these types of ecosystems fall. So that dashed line is the water table, and the creek has surface water that's above the ground level. But then as you move up in elevation next to the creek channel, you have a high water table that supports wetland vegetation and hydric soils. But then as you move up more in elevation, you get the riparian area. So there's still a water table, but it's not high enough to support wetland vegetation and hydric soils. So these areas really lie between the upland area and these wetlands and streams. So they're a very unique ecosystem with specially adapted plants for that system. And then we work in floodplains. And these are low-lying areas next to streams. And they become inundated with water during flood events. And they also contain high groundwater table from their landscape position. And they often contain a mosaic of wetland, riparian, and upland habitat. And so this bottom diagram shows you how they're like a valley, and they're usually surrounded by an upland area. And you get groundwater upwelling from those upland areas, and that supports some of the habitat in the floodplain. But then you also get overland flooding. And that overland flooding allows the creek to also move as it erodes. And so it carves out different kinds of habitat like meander scars, which have wetland riparian vegetation. You can have oxbow lakes or backwater channels that support wetlands. So these are really complex ecosystems with surface water, groundwater interactions. And so all of these ecosystems provide us with a lot of services, including flood attenuation that reduces peak flow. It helps with water quality by attenuating or where sediment deposits out, or it can you can have nutrient cycling, so it helps clean the water. It also provides movement corridors and habitat for wildlife. So these are really beneficial ecosystems. And it's estimated that about 2% of cover for wetlands in Colorado and 4% cover of riparian areas. But almost 75% of our wildlife depend on these ecosystems in some way or another. It's also estimated that we've lost 50% of our wetlands in Colorado, and up to 95% of riparian areas have been degraded by human activity. And the major impacts to these wetlands include draining for agriculture, incompatible recreation and development, so wetlands are filled. Climate change causes prolonged drought, so we're losing them through drought. So there's many ways that these wetlands are being impacted. Next slide, please. So the city of Boulder has several ways that it's trying to protect these regulations. First, the city of Boulder charter states that open space land shall be acquired, maintained, preserved, and restored. And then open spaces master plan includes the ecosystem health and resilience focus area, which relies on using the best available science to protect healthy, intact ecosystems and restore those that are impaired. And so that's really where the Wetland Riparian Program at OSMP comes into play. We're really here to help make sure that the wetland and riparian resources on OSMP are being protected and that we're restoring those that are impaired. The City of Boulder Municipal Code 939 was enacted to preserve, protect, restore, and enhance the quality and diversity of wetlands and water bodies, and to ensure no net loss of wetlands by encouraging avoidance of direct or indirect impacts to wetlands or its buffers. So under the city wetland ordinance, wetlands, streams, and water bodies are protected, as well as a 50-foot buffer around these wetlands. And then wetland protection is also a goal set forth in the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan. So in addition to these local regulations, wetlands are also protected at the state level from a recently enacted Regulation 87, that's a dredge and fill bill for the state. And then at the federal level, wetlands are protected under Section 404 of the Clean Water Act. So anytime we do work in or around wetlands, we have to get permitting from one or more of these agencies or regulations. Next slide, please. So we work with many work groups within OSMP, but I'm just really going to focus on trails and trailheads to give you an example of how we work with work groups. So we're often asked to consult on projects when there might be work in or around a wetland. So for trails and trailheads, here are some example projects that we've worked on in the last couple of years. And then this image shows the Hidden Valley reroute. And we were asked to go out and look for wetlands within their proposed trail alignment. And so we found some wetlands, we delineated them and put those regulatory buffers around them. And then we were able to work with trails to avoid or minimize impacts to this wetland. We also work and consult with the county when they are proposing trails on OSMP where there might be wetlands. And so again, we have some example projects like the North Foothills Bikeway. And again, we're really just trying to avoid or minimize impacts to wetlands on OSMP. If impacts can't be avoided, then our program helps support the permitting, we help plan the mitigation, we help implement it, and then we end up monitoring those mitigation sites. Next slide, please. So, wetland mitigation are sites where we create wetlands or we restore or enhance existing wetlands. And this is again to mitigate for impacts to wetlands because of projects. So the map on the left shows points on our system where we've done mitigation. And then the middle photo is a picture of community ditch trail that used to go through a wetland, but that trail was rerouted and we were able to restore that portion of the wetland and use it as mitigation for impacts to wetlands elsewhere on that project. And so that right photo shows where we've been able to restore the hydrology and we have wetland vegetation coming up. So under the permitting process, there are performance standards that we have to meet. And then we have to do 3 to 5 years of mitigation monitoring to make sure these mitigation sites are successful. Next slide, please. We also do wetland restoration. Oh, go ahead.
Yes. So, how recently did you do that community ditch restoration project?
That was probably about 4 years ago.
Okay. So the current trail along community ditch that we ride on already avoids that wetland.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
So we also do wetland restoration projects. These projects are typically funded by both operating and CIP funds. One example of a recent restoration project that we've been working on is the Suits Complex restoration. This is on the Suits property that's located north of Boulder Rec Center. In this project, we have been doing targeted weed management over the past 3 years to try to shift the vegetation community from one that's mostly dominated by non-native vegetation to native vegetation. And then you can see in these top 2 photos, people were using this wetland as a dump site. So there were large fill piles and debris. So we contracted to have that material removed, and we will be seeding this wetland in the next few weeks with a native seed mix. Next slide, please. So in order to support our mitigation and restoration projects, we have a native plant program. And so this is where we've contracted with a local nursery to grow out native trees and shrubs that we've collected from our system. They pot them up, grow them, and then we're able to use them on our projects. The species that we're currently growing are ones that we can't get commercially usually, or ones that we want to preserve the local genotype. The species we're targeting right now are Plains cottonwood, peachleaf willow, lead plant, hawthorn, American plum, and chokecherry. And then Jordan Swenson, our wetland ecologist, organizes up to 7 seed collections with volunteers each summer to collect native seed from wetland plants. And then she organizes these seed cleanings in the winter with volunteers where they prepare that seed to use in our projects. Next slide, please. So now we're going to look at a project that we've been working on for the past 2 years that's funded by an EPA grant called a Wetland Program Development Grant. And this project, there are 2 components to this project. First is the completion of wetland and riparian mapping. And for that, we partnered with the Colorado Natural Heritage Program as part of the grant to complete that mapping. And this mapping provides us with information on the type, size, and location of wetland and riparian resources. And it's really the necessary first step towards effectively and efficiently identifying and protecting these wetland and riparian resources. So in order to do our job well, we need to know what we have, where it is, and ultimately what condition it's in. Next slide, please. So how are wetlands mapped? Mapping is completed through the photo interpretation of 1-meter resolution color infrared aerial imagery. So these images to the right are examples of that imagery. So you're probably not used to looking at the world in red, but this imagery allows us to pull out the signature of wetland and riparian vegetation as well as soil moisture. And so the bottom image shows how the mapping has been overlain or done on that color infrared imagery. We also use ancillary data layers such as topographic maps, digital elevation models, soils data to improve our mapping accuracy. And then we go out in the field and we check those boundaries. So this EPA grant supported 1 field technician in the summer of 2024 to go out and verify these wetland boundaries. And then that information was sent back to the Heritage Program so they could refine the boundaries and make it more accurate. So the Heritage Program will be submitting this completed mapping to a national wetland and riparian database called the National Wetland Inventory, and that's overseen by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. There was prior mapping done for the NWI in the early 1980s, but that was done without all this great imagery that we have now, and it was mapped at a 1 to 40,000 scale, so it wasn't very accurate. And now we have all this wonderful aerial imagery to map to, and mapping is done at a 1 to 5,000 scale, so it's much more accurate than what was historically done. Next slide. So what is wetland and riparian mapping? So we use classification systems to group wetlands and riparian areas based on features such as vegetation, water source, function, or landscape position. So this is a map showing the completed wetland and riparian mapping for this project. So you can see the Suits property where I just showed you pictures from the restoration. That's located just north of the East Boulder Rec Center. We have South Boulder Creek and our Gebhardt project or property. And so the green polygons are the wetland mapping, and the orange polygons are the riparian mapping. And then you can see these codes like PEM1A or PSS1A. So those codes give me specific information about those wetland riparian areas when I look at them. We use wetlands and aquatic systems are mapped using the classification of wetlands and deep water habitats of the United States. We refer to that as the Cowardin classification because it's a lot to say. And then riparian areas are mapped using the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services system for mapping riparian areas in the western United States. Next slide, please. So there are 3 systems under that Cowardin classification. There's palustrine, which are inland freshwater wetlands, riverine, which are streams and rivers, and lacustrine, which are lakes that are at least 20 acres or larger. And then there are subsystems underneath that, which are based on the major vegetation types. That might be aquatic, emergent, scrub, shrub, or forested. And then if it's not vegetated, then it's based on its substrate. And then under those subsystems are these letters that denote the water regime. So how long is there water in that wetland? And then there are special modifiers that give you additional information about the wetland, like was it created by beavers? Is it impounded, excavated? And so the picture on the left is our most common wetland type on our system. It's a wet meadow. It's dominated by sedges, rushes, and grasses, and it typically only has water or saturated soils for a few weeks at the beginning of the growing season. And so this would be mapped as a palustrian, emergent, seasonally flooded wetland, as an example. Next slide, please. So then we're able to use these classifications to do what's called a wetland inventory. And so as part of this project, the Colorado Natural Heritage Program did a wetland inventory for us. And what we found is that 2,623 acres of wetland are on our properties, which accounts for about 6.9%. And what we also found is that most of the wetlands on our system are these palustrine emergent wetland or herbaceous wetlands. We also found that we have 358 acres of water bodies. So that's lakes and rivers and streams and canals and ditches. And that accounts for about 1% of our system. And then there were 410 acres of riparian, which is another 1%. So in total, we have about 9% of these resources on our land system. Next slide, please. So then we were also able to inventory the wetlands by their water regime. And what we found is that most of our wetlands are temporarily flooded or seasonally flooded. And so for a land manager, that's really good for me to know because these are our drier wetlands that only are saturated or have standing water for a few weeks out of the year. And so these are the wetlands that are going to be susceptible to being lost with prolonged drought due to climate change. So these are the wetlands that we really want to be tracking over time. Next slide, please. So then we're also able to group these classifications into ecological systems. These are probably the descriptors that you're used to hearing wetlands described as. So our wet meadows, so again, those are those wetlands with sedges, rushes, and grasses. We had 1,721 acres. But interestingly, just over 1,000 acres of those wetlands overlap with our irrigated lands. So as a land manager, that's really good for me to know because most of those wetlands then are being fully or partially sustained by our irrigation practices. We also found that we have 828 acres of riparian shrubland and woodlands, 344 acres of emergent marsh. Those are wetter wetlands that have cattails and bulrushes. And then 19 acres of saline depressions. These are wetlands that have salty soils and plants that are called halophytes that can tolerate salts live there. And on our system, the saline depression we have is sombrero marsh. Next slide, please. So how can wetland and riparian mapping be used? So this mapping supports land use planning and it helps us prioritize restoration. It also provides a sample frame for wetland monitoring and assessment, And it helps us analyze the data by comparing similar wetlands. So we want to be comparing apples to apples, not apples to oranges. And it helps us track gains and losses over time and ensures land management decisions are adequately protective. So I like to include this figure because it really shows how the wetland riparian mapping is the foundation of our program. And this inventory really tells us where we need to be doing the monitoring. The monitoring identifies trends and it helps us detect changes. And then the research helps us determine if we need to intervene. And if we decide we need to intervene, then we do our resource management and then we inventory and monitor again. So it's a big feedback loop, and the wetland riparian mapping is the foundation. But there are limitations of the wetland riparian mapping. So at the beginning of the presentation, I talked about how there are ecological wetlands and regulatory wetlands. Sorry. And so the mapping includes these ecological wetlands because we can really only pull out the vegetation and the hydrology. But federal, state, and local regulatory agencies with jurisdiction over wetlands define and describe them differently. They use that regulatory wetland definition with the 3 criteria. So these map wetlands do not represent the precise jurisdictional boundaries. So when there's a project near a wetland, we still have to go on site and do an official wetland delineation. Next slide, please. All right, we're going to switch gears now and talk about the EPA-funded project that we've been working on for the past 2 years. This is the second part of that project. So this is where we developed a wetland monitoring and assessment program, which we call WetMap. And so again, this was funded by the EPA grant, and it's where we go out and we take data from a wetland. We go out, there's a circle here because we always look at the same area. It's about 0.1 hectares. And we collect information on vegetation, we take photos, we classify the wetland based on these classification schemes we just looked at, and we look at soils. Next slide, please. But we also do what's called an intensive assessment. And this is where we collect really in-depth quantitative data, and it requires the highest level of effort. So these types of assessments will take us 4 to 5 hours at one wetland. And wetland plants are good indicators of wetland conditions, so that's what we focus on. And wetland plants are good because they're in every wetland. They have high species richness, and they're also sensitive to human disturbance and climatic change, so we can often see changes due to that. And so we use line point intercept, where we spread out 3 25-meter tapes, and then every half meter we drop a pin flag, and at that point we record all the vegetation that we see. Other quantitative data can be collected, including water quality, which we do. Some people collect information on macroinvertebrates, which are the bugs, or amphibians, but we ended up partnering with a researcher at CU Boulder to look at algae and to see if the presence or absence of certain species correlates with wetland condition. Next slide, please. We also did an ecological integrity assessment, and this is made up of 4 attributes. And those 4 attributes include landscape context, so that's looking at the condition of the buffer around a wetland. And we do that because research has shown that there's a strong correlation between wetland condition and the buffer condition. Then we collect data on hydrology, including water source, connectivity, and hydro period. We look at biotic structure, which is native and non-native plant species composition. Physicochemical, which describes the soil surface integrity and water quality of the wetland. And what we end up with through this assessment is a grade for each wetland. So the wetlands can be graded A, B, C, or D. Wetlands that are graded as A are in good condition, and that's where you probably want to focus your protection efforts. And the wetlands that are graded C or D are ones that are in poor condition, where you want to focus your restoration efforts. Next slide, please. Okay. So the EPA grant supported the hire of 2 seasonal field technicians this past summer, and they were able to complete 49 random sites. So this was a probability-based survey, meaning that we select a set of random sites, and then we're able to make assumptions about wetland condition over our land system based on the data collected at these points. So the pink triangles are our random sites, and we were able to visit 24 emergent, 13 scrub shrub, and 11 forested wetlands. We also completed 14 targeted sites. Those are the yellow triangles. And these are sites where we had specific management questions. So either we've already completed a mitigation or restoration site and we wanted to know how it was doing, or we went to places where we're planning on restoring in the future. So in total, we completed 63 sites. Next slide, please. So next steps for this EPA-funded project includes analyzing the data from this summer to determine ecological condition across OSMP, and identify the main stressors impacting our wetlands. We have a final report due to the EPA in June of 2026, and that will include a priority list of restoration sites. And then we plan on applying for another wetland program development grant this fall in order to develop a monitoring and assessment strategy for streams and riparian areas. And if we were awarded that grant, we would start that fieldwork in the summer of 2027. And we want to develop a long-term monitoring and assessment strategy from this work because we don't want to just go out once and collect this data. We really need to be going out every 3 to 5 years in order to track changes over time in wetlands. And ultimately, we want to incorporate all of this information into a wetland and riparian management plan. Next slide, please. All right, we're going to switch gears again and talk about the Boulder Creek Restoration Project that's being supported by an Army Corps of Engineer grant. So the Army Corps launched a pilot program under the Continuing Authorities Program, or CAP, and this allows them to fund small water resource projects that include ecosystem restoration. And so our Boulder Creek Restoration Project was one of 12 projects selected across the United States, and we are being awarded up to $15 million. So we're really excited about this project. It's a similar grant that funded Boulder County's Boulder Creek Restoration that's located just downstream from our properties, as well as our Goose Creek Restoration. The only difference is that under this pilot program, the Corps doesn't have to seek congressional authorization every year to fund the project. So hopefully that will streamline the process. This grant also does not require a match. So we're very excited about the project. And so this map shows the 4 sites that we are including in the feasibility analysis. That feasibility analysis is estimated to take 2 to 2.5 years. We're already in that process. When the feasibility analysis is done, we'll select 1 to 2 of these properties to actually implement the project. After the feasibility analysis is done, we'll move to the planning process and then implementation. So I put a star on here where Erdel is. That's where that big wetland restoration project was. I think you guys have done a tour out there. So I just wanted you guys to see that in relation to the 4 sites that we're including. So the 4 sites are 1 Shorten Milne, 2 Fort Chambers Poor Farm, 3 Culver, and 4 Boulder Valley Farms. And so this stretch of creek historically has had a lot of gravel mining. So there are all these deep gravel ponds in the floodplain. And the creek is really entrenched, meaning it's degraded and it's no longer accessing its floodplain, except for during really large flood events. So we're really hoping that through this project, we can restore some of those ecological processes. Next slide, please. So site option 1 is Shorten Milne. So I have a photo here from 1937 that shows the floodplain prior to the gravel mining. And then you can see now the creek has been straightened in some areas. It's pinned against these gravel ponds to the south. There's an active gravel operation to the east. And there's a berm all along the north side of this creek. So here we really want to try to create that mosaic of habitat that I talked about with wetland, riparian, and upland habitat. And then try to create some in-stream habitat and just reconnect the creek to its floodplain. Next slide, please. So site option 2 is Fort Chambers Poor Farm. I think you guys are probably familiar with this site. The eastern portion of the property will be the ecological restoration, while the western side will remain in agriculture and there'll be the healing trail. So for the ecological restoration, we're hoping to fill in these ponds and again, create a mosaic of habitat. We're a bit constrained on this property because there's a sewer line, city sewer line that goes north to south, but we would still like to create a little inset floodplain with some riparian habitat and let the creek have a little room to move. We would need to be able to partner with CPW because they own the Sawhill property across the creek. And so you can see in the 1937 image before the gravel mining that the creek was able to access its floodplain and kind of move across the floodplain. Next slide, please. So site option 3 is Culver. And I want to point out in the historical imagery from 1937, you can see all those dark gray areas in the northern part of that. That's a wetland signature. So that's showing that that creek used to move across that floodplain and carve out this wetland habitat as it moved. And now you can see in current time, we have a deep pond and some little cattail ponds. So again, we'd want to fill in those areas and create a mosaic of habitat and try to reconnect the creek to its floodplain. And then next slide. And then we have site option 4, which is Boulder Valley Farms. So again, a lot of these gravel ponds This portion of Boulder Creek has really poor water quality because it's located downstream from the water treatment plant. So we really want to focus on reconnecting the creek here, planting a lot of riparian area to decrease the water temperature here and provide more in-stream habitat. Next slide. Well, thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
Thanks, Kat. Questions?
I don't have any questions. It was a very thorough and interesting share. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Luckily, that was empty. So, Kat, just I guess I'll ask you one question. Um, are there any, is there any kind of desire to increase our wetland inventory, or are we just looking at existing wetlands and perpetuating the ones that we have that are in good shape, restoring the ones that we have that are not?
I mean, I think right now we're really just trying to maintain what we have and restore what's not in great condition. But there has been discussions about potentially using either in lieu fee program fees through the City of Boulder Wetland Ordinance and doing some mitigation baking on our site. That's just been an internal discussion, and that would increase the number of wetlands. But right now, we're really just trying to maintain and support the ones we have.
Because one of the things that I think I'm not saying we should go around looking for ways to create new wetlands, and I mean that there are some regulatory issues that come up that are can be painful, and you have wetland that gets created due to irrigation or something, and suddenly you got to pull a 404 permit to do anything with it. But we have a lot of these old gravel ponds, these remnants from mines that weren't restored, or there have been a lot of mine operations that have left, and they had a reclamation plan, and there was no money to actually finish the reclamation project, and so we're just left with ponds. And I don't hate ponds either, but it could be sort of an interesting opportunity as we talk about restoring the floodplain and reconnecting the creek to the floodplain. And all those ponds, for the most part, are in the floodplain. That's why they have gravel in them that's why they had gravel in them in the first place. So is that something that sometimes you guys dream about? If we had all the money in the world, we would start filling these ponds in and creating wetlands where they used to be.
Definitely. And so that Erdl project where we did the large wetland restoration project there, a lot of that was included filling in gravel ponds. And then this Boulder Creek restoration project that will be funded through the Army Corps, a lot of that will be filling in ponds and creating habitat for that. So we do dream about that.
Okay, thank you much. Oh, Sarah's got a question now.
I was curious, with the EPA grant that we're looking to renew, is there any sense that we wouldn't be able to, or does it seem likely that more money will be forthcoming?
It's a little bit up in the air right now with everything else going on in the world. So it's a competitive process to apply for these grants, and so I'm optimistic that we'll get it. We've been meeting our timeline for this project. We haven't gone over budget, so we've really set a nice precedence with the EPA. So my hope would be that we get the grant, but I also think there is less federal dollars in this grant round, so it's making it even more competitive.
Okay, thank you
Great.
very much.
Thank you.
All right, we're sticking with water. We're going to talk about water. We need to move from point A to point B at this point. So Dustin's going to come up, and Brian's coming up. And Andy Pelster, our senior manager of our water agricultural program area, is going to start off with a brief introduction and let these gentlemen get settled in.
Thanks, Dan, and trustees, thanks for having us tonight. I'm Andy Pelster, the Ag and Water Stewardship Senior Manager for the department. I oversee our agricultural leasing, ag land restoration, and the water resources programming for the department. So tonight you're going to hear a water resources program update. It's a program that has not been to the board for quite some time, so I think it's going to be new information for most of you. I hope you find it interesting. It is, we own a very significant portfolio of water and an extensive system of irrigation ditches that support our agricultural lands. But they also provide lots of ecosystem services that Kat demonstrated in her presentation. So there are 3 staff members in the Water Resources Program. Dustin Allard is the Water Resources Senior Project Manager who oversees the program. And Brian Malton is our Senior Program Manager who oversees the maintenance and operations of the program. So they're going to give you a rundown of the program and hopefully have some questions for them at the end.
All right. Thanks for the introduction, Andy. Good evening, trustees. As Andy mentioned, my name is Dustin Allard, and I'm the Open Space and Mountain Parks. Is that on? Thank you. Senior Project Manager. Thanks for having us this evening. And as you said, it's been a while since we've been able to give an update, and so we're happy to be here tonight. As Kat mentioned, we'd love to take questions throughout the presentation. If there's a photo that you're interested in chatting about that we don't cover, please let us know, and we'll make sure to save some time at the end as well for additional questions. Our Water Resources Group is housed in the Resource and Stewardship Service Area here at Open Space, and our group is comprised of 5 staff, 3 full-time standard positions, and 2 9-month technicians. Our group is comprised, the maintenance and fuels position was an addition in 2023, as well as a second technician for our group. Next slide. This evening, we'd like to break our program down into 3 key function areas. We have administration, operations, and maintenance. At the center of the Water Resources Program is our extensive water rights portfolio. Open Space manages city-owned water rights dating back to the 1860s on 5 creeks, which serve 62 water entities that we have ownership in. We have storage rights in 10 reservoirs, which support year-round operations. We own 324 units of Colorado Big Thompson water, which is used supplementally in the northern part of our system. In the last few years, we've also leased supplemental water from Baseline Reservoir and the left-hand water ditch. We have 1 high hazard dam at Wonderland Lake in North Boulder. Many of our water rights were acquired with land, but occasionally these are purchased as standalone property as well. Next slide. The majority of our water rights portfolio is leased through our agricultural leasing program, which supports 29 tenants on 7,000 acres of irrigated land. We have 281 miles of ditch that traverse open space property, and we maintain over 800 active structures, which help us deliver water, including 24 main headgates. These structures can range from large diversion structures off the creek with flow measurement to small concrete splitter boxes, which move water through a field. While our water rights portfolio is primarily used for agriculture, it also supports an important wetland and riparian habitat that Kat spoke about, as well as endangered species such as the Ute lady tresses, Preble's jumping mouse. Irrigated hayfields also support bobolinks. Next slide. Climate change continues to stress our traditional methods of irrigation and water rights administration. In response, we work closely with our peers at utilities to evaluate water needs and acquisition opportunities on a regular basis. Open Space uses a variety of decision support tools to help analyze our portfolio, which supports operations, lease writing, and other supply planning needs. We work closely with the City Attorney's Office to monitor water court cases that may have an impact on our portfolio. Staff keep an eye on monthly drought, snowpack, and stream flow forecast. And as state administration looks to count every drop of water, Open Space has become a leader in the community, installing modern measurement on our ditches and advocating for measurement on ditches where we're a large shareholder. We believe one of the most critical ways to address climate change and demand is through capital improvement projects and the efficient use of water we already have. Next slide. Open Space's large and diverse portfolio means we currently serve on 17 ditch boards and help manage half a dozen or more unincorporated lateral groups. Water Resources staff are an integral part of the water community, wearing many hats as we balance our shareholder interest with supporting local ditch companies through active service in these board positions. Staff attend more than 30 annual meetings each off-season and host several meetings for companies where we serve as president. We also sit on a number of subcommittees which support district initiatives and stream management planning. Next slide. Thank you. Water Resources staff manage an operating budget of $887,000, which supports our 3 standard staff and 2 technician. This budget also supports over $300,000 in annual dues paid to private ditch companies where we have ownership. The operation budget also allows our group to contract additional resources for earthwork, tree removal, and other operations and maintenance needs. In 2025, our capital budget was $268,000. This money was used for irrigation infrastructure improvements, as well as projects like supporting the South Boulder Creek in-stream flow program and invasive tree removal along ditch corridors. In 2026, our anticipated operating budget will shrink slightly to $880,000, while our capital budget grows to $493,000. This is an increase over what was shared in the memo, which includes an additional discrete infrastructure project. Next slide. Water Resources staff oversee the operation and maintenance of 1 high hazard dam at Wonderland Lake, as well as an additional 6 non-jurisdictional dams, ensuring safe operation and the protection of downstream communities. While only Wonderland Lake is classified as high hazard, we use these best management practices on the non-jurisdictional dams as well. Our reservoirs are primarily decreed for irrigation purposes, but have many incidental benefits, such as supporting local ecosystems, wildlife, recreation opportunities, and the aesthetic benefit that come with them.
Hey, Dustin.
Yeah.
Just for the people who are listening who might not understand terminology around dams
Mhm.
and might be concerned about Wonderland
Sure.
Lake being a high hazard dam,
Mhm.
maybe you could explain just what a category that is and what it means.
Yeah, high hazard is second from the top based on the risk in the event of a failure, not necessarily its current condition. We're in good standing based on our annual dam inspections, which I can speak about here.
So basically, a high hazard dam is a dam that holds back a lot of water.
Yep.
Yeah.
And its location is, if it were to fail because of where it sits, the risk that it poses gives it that classification.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks. Next slide, please. Because Wonderland is classified as high hazard, there are additional requirements each season to stay in compliance and maintain our fill status. We complete annual inspections with the Division of Water Resources and monthly tow drain monitoring, which measures the amount of water seeping through the dam. We remove vegetation on the dam face and in the spillway each year. We also update the emergency action plan annually and attend dam owner workshops. Wonderland Lake, as I mentioned, is currently in good standing, and DWR has allowed us our full capacity storage. Next slide. Open space staff continue to support an in-stream flow program for South Boulder Creek. South Boulder Creek is heavily impacted by irrigation use, sometimes leading to dry sections over winter. Because of this, an in-stream flow program was identified in city planning as far back as the late 90s. In 2010, council authorized participation in the Gross Environmental Pool. The department has been working to secure water rights and prepare for this expansion since. Open Space works closely with the Utilities Department, building on their experience gained through managing the Boulder Creek in-stream flow program. Next slide, please. While the Gross expansion project is underway, staff continue to work towards goals identified in the intergovernmental agreement between the City of Boulder and Lafayette. We're currently focused on in-stream flow measurement and have stream gauges installed at 4 of the 5 locations identified in that IGA. These sites are all telemetered and flows can be viewed in real time online. Once these 5 sites are complete, staff will work to enter into bypass agreements with the affected ditch companies. Staff also sit on South Boulder Creek Stream Management Steering Committee, partnering with Trout Unlimited, which is overseeing fish passage installation at 5 locations between KOA Lake and El Dorado Springs. Once the environmental pool is filled, the program will support releases from Gross Reservoir, which keep target flows in the creek year-round, eliminating dry-ups. A 2019 City of Boulder water supply assessment shows a centered 17% increase in agricultural demand by 2050. This is looking at changes in temperature and precipitation. If we're not proactive in supplementing our portfolio, open space stands to see a shortage in available water over the next few decades. In addition to increasing efficiency through capital projects, open space staff work to acquire water as it becomes available. Water valuations can be contracted using local engineers, but also done internally on a case-by-case basis. Water sales are not always public or separate from the land, which can make valuations difficult. Using Colorado Big Thompson values and other sale data, open space considers each acquisition opportunity that comes to us. As you can see, the charts above show an increase in cost and a decrease in volume of sales. The lower chart shows the exponential growth of Colorado Big Thompson units, which are often used as a comp in our valuations. This year, we purchased shares in the Butte Mill, Jones, Donnelly, and Dry Creek No. 2 ditches, and they were funded through an open space acquisition reserve. We're currently negotiating sales of left-hand and baseline water, which are the two sources of water we lease from annually at this time. That lease is with the utilities department at the City of Boulder. Next slide, please. Not only are water rights becoming more expensive, but fewer rights are being sold. Ag currently uses 86% of the water the state delivers each year, but accounts for only 6% of the acquisitions. As growth continues, municipalities which currently use 7% of the water are acquiring 83% of what comes to market. While some ditches are changing bylaws to limit speculative buyers, water is seen as an investment to some, further reducing availability for ag. The dominant type of transfer seen here is from agriculture to municipal use. The Colorado Department of Natural Resources suggests that in the last 30 years, 8% of irrigated ag land has been lost. Next slide. A few more interesting data points. I mentioned previously some ditch companies are working to shield their water rights through bylaw changes limiting availability for speculative buyers. The top chart shows water rights annual growth over 20 years versus the stock market in gold. The second graph shows the increase in prices over time for Colorado Big Thompson water versus ditch shares. And while they're following a similar trend, the ditch company shares are much harder to value and fetch a wider range due to the unique individual interest, location, and reliability. I mentioned earlier, capital improvement projects are one of the key methods for dealing with changing climate and water availability by creating efficient operations using the water we already have. Staff coordinate annually with our tenants to understand their highest priority needs each season. After meeting with our tenants, staff meet to discuss internal priorities and current function of infrastructure. Non-functioning infrastructure is our highest priority. Staff seek to understand if there are community partnership opportunities for each project and whether these projects would be worthy of grant funding. When we then consider our annual budget and prioritize our capital work plan. Next slide, please. Each year we complete critical infrastructure improvement projects. Listed here are notable projects that are completed for 25 or in process. In the interest of time, we'll run through one of the bigger projects from this season in more detail on the next slide. In 2022, the siphon under South Boulder Creek carrying Howard ditch water was identified for replacement due to age and limited capacity. Howard ditch water is the most senior water right on South Boulder Creek. Staff initially were interested in doing the work as a standalone project, boring under the creek. When quotes started to come in, we realized we would have to phase this project as our capital budget didn't support it. While working on preliminary design, we learned of another project in the permitting phase in the area, the Gebhardt Bridge and Trail project. To minimize project impacts, staff decided it was mutually beneficial to bring these two projects together. We were able to finish design for the siphon with a new and improved scope and get it permitted as a part of the Gebhardt project. Doing these projects together significantly decreased the cost and the footprint of having two projects in the same area spread over many years. Piping the lateral, which was not originally in the scope, allowed for the trail alignment to cross the ditch in a preferred location, and enclosing the lateral eliminated a decades-long concern about mosquitoes and breeding in the stagnant water. After consultation, staff decided to use an open cut to cross the creek rather than boring under. Putting the creek in a pipe temporarily allowed the project to have access to the east side without going around driving around, which greatly reduced travel and trail closures. Our tenants and staff have reported that the new line has greatly improved their irrigation operations in this area. Next slide. Staff have started to prioritize a list of 2026 projects. We'll use the previously described methods to narrow this list down and inform our 2026 capital work plan. Next slide. One of the identified projects from that list remains a top priority for 2026. This is the Brubaker Diversion Project. The splitter box delivers water to open space tenants and multiple private users. It's a great example of aging infrastructure that has been patched over the years, but is limiting our ability to effectively irrigate nearby land. Staff have received quotes for this crack willow's removal, which is breaking the concrete and causing cattle to gather in the shade around the structure, worsening erosion. We've worked with wildlife and identified this tree as a raptor perch and will erect a new perch in the adjacent field as a part of our project. Open Space was recently awarded a grant to support this project through the St. Vrain and Left Hand Water Conservancy District, and we're working closely with our tenants and private users to understand their needs as we advocate for this work. We'd like to now move into the next key area of our presentation, operations, and I'd like to introduce Brian Walton, our Senior Water Resources Program Manager.
Thank you, Dustin, and good evening, trustees. Thank you again for having us. Again, I'm Brian Walton. I'm the Water Resources Senior Program Manager. I oversee the operations and maintenance programs and will be providing an update on these two portions of the program. Next slide, please. First is our operations program. OSMP and water resources staff help deliver water for agricultural, ecological, wildlife, and recreational purposes. Where OSMP is the sole shareholder of a ditch or reservoir, our team facilitates those water deliveries. This consists of headgate and measurement operations and often physically walking water to its final destination. These deliveries consist of up to 10 ditches and 10 reservoirs. In addition to these, we help support deliveries and maintenance on unincorporated ditches where OSMP has large ownership. As part of these deliveries, we coordinate and understand needs with OSMP's agricultural lessees who call for water, understand when and where ecological sites would receive the most benefit, and coordinate and follow the Division of Water Resources direction for ditch priorities. Next slide, please. General Colorado irrigation season runs from around April 1st to end of October. This table provides a snapshot of staff operation efforts for the 2025 season. When conditions allow and creek flows are available, we begin with early season reservoir deliveries around March 1st. The bulk of water deliveries and calls for irrigation water from tenants begins in May, and late season water can extend through September. Generally, this keeps the water resources staff with a large focus on deliveries for 6 months of the year. In peak summer months, when multiple ditches are running, operations becomes a 24/7 job. Staff remain available to respond to creek flow fluctuations, make headgate adjustments, respond to Division of Water Resources requirements, and respond to flooding inquiries. Next slide, please. In water resources operations, we tend to talk about water in two different metrics. CFS is our cubic feet per second, which is our flow rate, and acre feet, which is our volume of water. For anyone that's unfamiliar, and to assist with these metrics in a visual manner, the acre foot volume is equal to 1 acre of land covered in a depth of 1 foot of water. With measurement devices on most OSMP staff operated ditches and laterals, we're able to confirm acre feet delivered through all measured sites on an annual basis. This year, staff supported delivery of over 1,500 acre feet to its various sites. Next slide, please. Moving into the maintenance portion of the program, Dustin discussed the CIP program earlier, and the maintenance side of the program works similarly. How our group may identify and prioritize project and improvement needs. Compared to the CIP program, we identify O&M projects as those that can often be completed and supported by staff, workforce resources, and smaller contracted projects. Projects can vary widely, supporting a number of work group goals and priorities. These various types of maintenance projects support improving irrigation conveyance and efficiency, increasing maintenance access, capacity improvements, reduction of flooding risk, maximizing on-field irrigation, and reducing maintenance backlogs. As we've talked about different types of maintenance, there are often different methods. Methodology and timing are often chosen or determined to minimize resource impacts or are driven by ditch accessibility. The picture included on this slide is a great example of work that was completed on private property as well. Our methods of work can also be determined and negotiated through conversations with private owners to minimize property impact while completing necessary ditch improvements. Next slide, please. Over the past several years, and as the Water Resources staff team has rounded out, we have also improved maintenance and data tracking. Over the past 2 years, maintenance efforts completed by full-time and seasonal staff have exceeded 5 miles annually. Our seasonal and field staff that complete the bulk of maintenance efforts are critical to completion of this work and always appreciated for the hard work they do. In addition to water resources efforts, I wanted to note and thank our agricultural restoration team, who are also housed in the Ag and Water Division. Their group also supports many projects and miles of irrigation maintenance annually to support their land restoration efforts. Next slide, please. The other side of the maintenance program includes workforce and volunteer service support. The Water Resources Group utilizes these forces on an annual basis, coordinate project needs, and staff are always on site to educate and support all project logistics. The Ready to Work program averages 14 miles of ditch cleaning annually. These efforts are typically during the first six weeks of the season, beginning in March, and supporting pre-season ditch cleaning. This most often includes hand tool cleaning and vegetation removal to prepare for ditch flows. During the 2025 season, Water Resources partnered with the Junior Rangers program. This was a great opportunity to expose junior rangers to irrigation and agriculture in the area. Junior Rangers supported woody and historic ditch spoil pile removals, supporting the fuels mitigation program that will be discussed shortly. And lastly, when and where possible, we utilize volunteer services. This year's largest effort included ditch cleaning, primarily consisting of trash and debris removal. These are also great opportunities to expose the community to irrigation ditches, their purpose, and history of ditches in Boulder. Next slide, please. So in this presentation, I've talked a lot about metrics, especially around operations and maintenance efforts. So how are we recording and tracking that data to maximize its value? For operations, measurement sites with telemetry can send data to the state website for real-time tracking and season diversion records. At sites that might have measurement but don't have real-time reporting, we're able to download records for the season and submit those to the Division of Water Resources. When maintenance projects are complete, we use the Beehive Asset Management Platform. For water resources and other work groups, this gives us the opportunity to track trends in maintenance and plan for future maintenance and capital needs. And related to data, we hope to plug our ongoing condition assessment efforts. Over the past year, staff have worked with OSMP GIS staff to completely overhaul our GIS layer and ability to track details related to water resources structures. A comprehensive condition assessment of every structure on the OSMP system is underway, and we believe this will help inform future water resources, capital, and budget requests. Once this effort is complete, I'd be happy to revisit and provide another update to the board on the results of these assessments. Next slide, please. Moving into the fuels mitigation side of the program. This program is managed by Steve Zweber, who undertakes mitigation and ditch company collaboration efforts, focusing within the wildland urban interface. Following the Marshall Fire, vegetation, proximity to housing, and other factors around ditches raised public concern around the risk for wildfire. This prompted OSMP to increase focus toward potential fuels mitigation along the ditch corridors. At that time, Steve's position was developed, water resources funding was increased to address spoils, and increased collaboration with the ditch companies began. To prioritize sites, staff are using ditch fuel site assessments, increasing mapping and data collection, and collaborating with OSMP and city wildland fire staff to prioritize areas. Next slide, please. Efforts during the 2025 season have been enormous by Steve and the Water Resources Seasonal team. The team has been fortunate to collaborate with active ditch companies and active ditch riders. These projects have been completed with a lens of ditch maintenance and ditch conveyance, while also incorporating OSMP goals of invasive tree removal and removal of spoils. The team has also taken on spoil pile cleanup on various properties. Typically, these were woody spoils placed on the banks during ditch cleaning efforts. Some of these spoil piles are decades old and removal efforts are ongoing. Additional work is contracted when the scope requires or when tree cutting requires more technical arborist work. These projects are addressing large linear sections of ditch and reducing invasive species, dead standing, and dead and down debris. All of this work is evolved in a short matter of time to also look at projects sustainably. Almost all woody material is being chipped or ground, and through partnerships is being used for composted or repurposed materials. Next slide, please. Looking towards the future of the fuels mitigation program and its evolution, we hope to continue removing ditch fuels and spoils with a focus on sustainability, leverage collaborative efforts, and partner with ditch companies and other stakeholders. We will continue to address ditch fuel concerns on OSMP lands while prioritizing wildland urban interface areas, proximity to homes, and proximity to OSMP resources and assets. Next slide, please. And lastly, we want to address and discuss future challenges for the water resources program as a whole. Climate change, which is impacting lower average snowpacks, drought, and unpredictable irrigation seasons are putting pressures on water availability and aging infrastructure. Interstate compacts and litigation involved in these historic agreements at larger scales could put pressure on water availability at the local level. While OSMP purchased water rights remain for open space charter purposes, outside changes or use of water rights may impact ditches where OSMP holds interest. Irrigation ditches and associated infrastructure can be up to 160 years old. Delays in maintenance and resource limitations for replacement lead to challenges in delivery and efficiency. And last, as administration from the state tightens to account for every drop of water, additional measurement or new accounting obligations may continue to arise, further limiting water availability in some cases. Next slide. And thank you. I think that's all we have for this evening, and happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Any questions? John?
I did not realize we owned the dam at Wonderland Lake. How did we come to own and operate a high hazard dam? I'm sure there's a story there.
That's a great question. Dan might be better suited to answer that.
Yeah, that's even before my time.
I've in looking forward and trying to figure out how to manage Wonderland Lake, I've been through some of the files and understand that there was change to the infrastructure around the 80s. I could provide some additional information if it's helpful after the fact, but the acquisition is a history that I'm less familiar with. So that's something I could chat with Bethany on and
Sure.
and share with all of you.
Yeah, I'd just be curious
Yeah.
if you have any info.
Sure.
That was all I had. Thank you for the presentation.
Michelle?
Yeah, I know you collaborate with the utilities department and Parks and Rec and city attorney's office. Do does the Greenways Committee still exist? And that was a collaboration with a board member of each of those. And I know when I was on Parks and Rec, I think I got assigned to that committee for a couple of years, but
I
I
was
just
on
wondered,
it too.
were you on it too? Yeah, but they only met like once a
Once,
year or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
The
do they still meet?
governance structure has changed, so I don't think that that's functioning, but there's still a greenways program within the city that's under the umbrella of the utilities department. And there was I would say about 3 or 4 years ago now, an inventory to sort of get everybody's management and property associations correct within our greenways vicinity. So we now have a much better understanding of where OS&P management is, where's utility management, where's Parks and Rec management. So that was a big effort over the past 3 or 4 years. But I would say that governance model shifted about 4 years ago. So I'm not so sure that there is that sort of board liaison representation anymore, sort of overseeing that program. But it still exists and it's still within the utilities department.
You have anything, Sarah?
Oh yeah, so it's 87% of our water is going to agriculture right now, and it's 20%, it looks like we're at a 20% deficit over the next 20 years, or can you remind me
Sure.
of what those?
Yeah,
that
so 86 to 89% of the water that's delivered as surface water in the state is going for agricultural use. And the city created, I think, the 2019 water supply study using the center model. So that's a range, the average essentially. Looking at temperature and precipitation came up with that number of a 17% increase. And that's in consideration of baseline use. So if nothing else changes other than those modeling behaviors, that's the type of increase that we could anticipate.
Uh-huh. And so, and are you feeling optimistic about our ability to keep up with that demand? Are there specific, I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit more
Sure.
off the cuff about that.
Always optimistic. I
Sure.
think we're looking at acquisition opportunities really seriously, and that's a conversation that we're going to continue to have within our group. More than ever, we're focusing on those capital projects that I mentioned that are going to bring efficiencies to the water that we're using and that we have now. So protecting the water that we have and how we use it is a top priority while we're looking for those acquisition opportunities. Can we build 17% into the work that we're doing in the next 25 years? I hope so. But we're committed to being creative with the water that we have and making sure we're meeting the demands of our tenants.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and Dustin, I think you're referring to some of the current efforts we're going. I mean, if you date back 5 or 6 years ago, we had a big effort on better understanding our inventory of all of our water rights, where they can be used. Are we utilizing them to the fullest? So we sort of had that process early on of analyzing existing water rights. Are we fully utilizing it? Where can we utilize it? Now we're kind of focusing more on the infrastructure and that sort of thing. So it's been an evolving program for sure in terms of where our attention is focused at any given moment.
In that example that you showed with the tree and the routing of the water, that was one example of sort of ditch maintenance. Can you talk a little bit more about the ditch maintenance in respect to delivery to the agricultural system? Where are we at? Is our system 90% good? Is it how much is faltering? How much could be improved? Just a ballpark if you know.
Sure, that's a great question. And I think the work that Brian's doing to get eyes on those 850 to 1,000 pieces of infrastructure is really going to tell that story. It's such a wide range. And I think the biggest indicator for the health of the system right now is our tenants' ability to receive water and produce. And so our priorities remain in that non-functioning realm. It'd be tough to venture to say. Do you have anything to add, Brian?
Yeah, I can add just from initial condition assessment efforts. I'm probably less than 10% through that right now. So far, I'm accounting for vegetation removal, ditch condition, up and downstream, and concrete and headgate condition. Honestly, I feel like every time I go into the field, we're finding whether it's just vegetation removal or concrete projects. So I think we are going to produce quite a few maintenance projects out of this process.
And it may be that 90% of our infrastructure is currently working, maybe even higher. But it's the condition and how long it's going to last that we're concerned about, because so much of what moves water through our system is just earth and channel. It's a bit of a revolving door of maintenance. And so 10 years from now, some of the things that Brian and I visited, we'll need to have at it again. And that's where the efficiency piece is really built in. If we can stay up on the earthen portions of these ditches, we're going to bring a lot of that efficiency back to the portfolio. And then as we can address the larger capital projects with the budget that we have, that's a smaller portion of it, because most of our water is running through those earthen laterals and ditches.
Uh-huh. We received a really kind of robust email from a citizen with very concrete suggestions around looking for funding and doing as best we can to maintain and improve our irrigation delivery systems. And I found it to be really interesting. I was married for 15 years to the head of water asset management for Denver Water. We used to have a lot of kitchen table conversations and have seen how important this issue is and watched over these years how increasingly important it is, especially for delivery to our ag systems and the Colorado River and everything drying up. So it was really timely to hear your presentation, and I'm really glad that we're doing the work and being proactive. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we recognize how nuanced it is, and it may take a second round of diving into some of this stuff, and we're more than happy to do it.
Yeah, thank you guys. It's been a great presentation, and really enjoyed it. Fascinating system. I'm gonna go back to for my question. I want to just go back to the theme I was asking Kat about, and it's probably for you, Dustin. You know, all of these ponds that we're left with from gravel operations. If the mining company actually did the restoration that they were supposed to do, or the reclamation they were supposed to do, if they were going to leave it as a pond, then they needed to get an augmentation plan to take into account all the evapotranspiration and the evaporation of the water off the exposed groundwater that those ponds really are. Do we have any ponds in our inventory that actually have an augmentation plan associated with them?
The one I'm familiar with is the Arapahoe Pit D pond, and we work in collaboration with the utilities group to make sure that that's augmented. Most of the ponds that are scattered throughout our system are what we call pre-1981, and they end up being exempt from those evaporative losses that you're talking about.
Yeah, I was just thinking as you know, we talk about trying to restore floodplains and potentially creating wetlands by filling in old gravel pits, you know, to potentially focus on ones that have augmentation plans so we can recapture some of that water.
Right.
Would be another concept where we could get some water for not free, but sort of.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Any other feedbacks? No. Well, thank you very much for a wonderful
Thank you.
presentation. Great to see you.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Dustin. All right, we're going to bring Andy back up for our final matters from the department today. We're going to stick with our agricultural theme and hone in on some animals and some innovation, some high-tech cattle. We've been exploring and piloting a virtual fencing, and are now have some experience under our belt, some learnings under our belt in terms of how can we use this technology going forward? How could it enhance management? How could it assist our tenants? How could it assist our fuels mitigation work? A whole bunch of different neat potential that goes with the virtual fencing project. So we thought just a very quick update to you all might be informative as we look at this new technology that we're starting to dabble in.
Thanks, Dan. Happy to be here to give a quick update on some of our findings and kind of a fun project that my team's been involved with over the past couple of years. Next slide, please. So this idea of virtual fencing has been around for quite a while, but it's taken a while for it to become commercially available at scale for producers and for entities like us. But as we've thought about it, we certainly thought it would be useful for the department, particularly for reducing infrastructure needs, for example, and maintenance cost. If you can imagine our southern grasslands that around Coal Creek, for example, there's 4 or 5 pastures there, but those are all created by interior fencing. If we would get broad adoption of virtual fencing, we could get rid of interior fencing and then only have that boundary fence to maintain. So there are some cases where that might be desirable for the department. Another example might be our larger property like Jewel Mountain. We raise that as one pasture. Having a virtual fence to split it into 2 or 3 pastures could be a benefit as well. One thing that's also pretty exciting, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but having really good livestock location data is interesting and could be used to analyze how the cattle are using the landscape, how they might be impacting other resources on the system. So that's one thing that I think a broader group of staff is pretty excited about is having this really good information. We also thought it would be could help us in some instances reduce, I'll say, the opportunity for livestock conflict. Whether that's cattle bunching up on a trail or pedestrian gate challenges where a gate gets left open and the operator's cattle get in the wrong pasture. It takes time for the operator to get in the right pasture. But we do have some conflict on the system, and there might be some opportunity using the system to help with that. And also, more recently, we've thought about it as a wildland fuels mitigation, where we can keep cattle closer to developed areas as part of their grazing strategy. Next slide, please. So quickly, we'll kind of review how these systems work. We're using a system from Merck. It's called Fence with a V. It has a base station. We have 2 base stations that we purchased with some grant funding that we received. But those base stations can cover 5,000 to 10,000 acres. And they're basically kind of a line of sight system. And we're using 2 towers at the moment, one on up in the tall oak grass grazing area, and then also one on Lookout Hill. And then each individual animal has a collar that they wear. The collar have a GPS transceiver in it, as well as radio transceiver. So the GPS tells where the collar's at. The receiver then communicates to the tower to help the system communicate. And then the operator, the owner of the cattle or whichever livestock, there's an app, tabletop, or they can use it on their phones, laptop, to set those grazing boundaries. And that those 3 communicate together, and the collar helps keep the cattle in their position. It starts with the sound cue, so as the livestock gets a certain distance from the boundary, it hears a noise, and when it gets to the boundary or crosses, it will get an electric pulse similar to electric fencing, and it's a humane electric pulse to tell the animal to move back in the boundary. And the cattle can get trained to this. You can think of it much like a pet owner might train dogs with a wireless or the wired boundary for their pet around their home. Next slide, please. And this is an example of one of the towers. We opted to set the tower on a trailer so we could be mobile with the towers and move them, since we're kind of in an experimental phase. We also we contacted the owners of the tower field up on El Dorado Mountain, because you could get huge coverage from there. But the cost was just too much to pay to have it up there. So we began analyzing our system for high points, and this is how we're opting to do it at the moment. This trailer is a little bit of a combination on the back half of the trailer. That is actually that's the solar panel and battery pack for the tower system. What is not shown is there's a tower that goes 12 to 15 feet in the air to capture the signal. Next slide, please. So now we're going to move into a few animations of information that we've collected this grazing season. So Sam, on the bottom left, there you go. The left map, the red and green, we're calling it, I'd like to just refer to it as a hotspot map, so to speak. So where it's red, that's where the cattle spent more time. Where it's green, that is less time. This is an animation of the tall oak grass and Shanahan management area from this grazing season. So you can see how the cattle have moved, or how the cattle moved through that system this past summer. And again, I mentioned it's really nice to have this kind of information because we can review the animation. We can go on the ground then and see if we see the same thing on the land, and use this information to make some grazing management choices. You know, do we need to bring more cattle so we can have a better distribution of livestock across the system? Do we need to decrease or increase the grazing time? Do we need to add water sources or change? Salt and water is a way that we can get cattle to move on the landscape the way we want them to. So it's been fun and interesting to see how the cattle use the landscape. The second, on the right-hand side, it's not an animation, but the blue on that map shows tall oak grass density, and the orange dots on that map show actual livestock locations. So you can ask yourself, are the cattle eating tall oak grass? In the bottom right, you see there's a very good overlap, very dense tall grass with quite a few orange dots in it, and maybe not quite so much in the rest of that picture. So when we go back and look at the grazing information on the bottom right, we found that the cattle were there at the ideal time. The tall oak grass was really palatable and really lush. So you can see that they spent a lot of time in there. On the others, that was later in the season, still having an impact on tall oak grass, but just not focusing quite the energy on it that they do when it's perfectly timed. And we can use this information to talk to our partners about how important it is to have the cattle at these critical times that we're talking about to have an impact. A couple of other things in the map, the lower left, that actually is a paddock that didn't get grazed, so that's why there aren't any orange spots in there. And then the areas closer to the homes, we actually found out that we didn't have good radio coverage. So the cattle were actually getting up adjacent to the residences, but the system wasn't picking them up because of that, because we didn't have good cell coverage or good radio frequency coverage. Next, please. So this is, and again, this will be another video, Sam, if you want to click on that. This is our open space and mountain parks Biddle property. It's leased by the Golden Hoof, and they use a strip grazing strategy. And so this is about 5 or 6 weeks of their grazing this summer. And you can see that they move the cattle across the property in those narrow strips. You can tell that the grazing is pretty dense, a little bit lower in number, perhaps, and that's why they use the narrow strips. They're grazing in each of those strips 1 to 4 days, and they're setting up their paddocks just, based on the availability of forage in that paddock. And you also notice the cattle keep coming to that lower left corner. That is a gate into their field. These are dairy cows, so they do come in for dairy purposes, but they also were getting their water in that lower left corner of that field. So it's just another neat presentation of how this is very regenerative grazing system, and we can demonstrate that using this information. Next, please. And this one is also in Maine. So this is on the open space and Mountain Parks Hartnagel property. This is Andy Brighter and Grandma Grass and Livestock. Couple of things to note. You see a higher density of animals here. You see a more block grazing strategy. If you watch the timeline, you can't see it, but if you look at that information, they are actually moving these cattle every day. So again, just another a very regenerative grazing strategy on another one of our properties, and a fun representation of how to use this information. Next slide, please. Next steps, I guess one thing I didn't mention earlier in the presentation, this summer we did not use the system to control livestock as far as keeping them in a paddock. We had some circumstances with logistics, tenants getting a little bit cold feet about the system. So we opted to still work with our partners, learn more about the system. So really we have quite a bit of interest from a number of tenants. So we want to continue with the tenants, try to get them used to the technology, so we can get broader adoption down the road. And we're also, it's a pilot project, so we're learning what the pitfalls are. We're learning how many towers do we have to have full coverage on the pieces of the system that are critical for us. And really just using the system, having the operators see the information on their phones and saying, hey, my cows are here today, and knowing that they're not getting out is helpful, and hopefully building support for them to use the system more broadly. And also, we are piloting a second system. It's a system named Halter. It's from New Zealand, and it may be more conducive to our system. So Bob and Bobby Lover at Boulder Valley Ranch are really excited about using that on Boulder Valley Ranch. They have a lot of problems with ped gates and that sort of thing up there. So between the two systems, we hope to continue working with their tenants. We have a bulk of the vents bought. We bought 300 collars and have the 2 towers, so we can continue to use it in multiple scenarios. Again, we're hoping that we can do something on Jewel Mountain with our partner there to cut that into 2 grazing pastures. And we're also hoping to work with that same partner on some fuels mitigation grazing. I guess I was also mentioned that the cows that were on the most recent, where was the
Dakota Ridge?
Dakota Ridge, sorry. The cows on Dakota Ridge did have collars on them. Again, we just have location information there, but hopefully as we progress with that project, we'll see these collars used to keep them in place. With that, I can take questions, answer questions.
Cows are so funny. I did spend 2 days this week out with cows, herding cows. And also I noticed at the lunch that there were farmers talking about, sort of joking about their cows escaping. And, but at the same time, it does take up time and energy, and chasing around the cows is difficult for sure. I can even say that personally. So I love this program. I love the mapping that we're able to do, and I'm really excited about it. My question is, how many cattle approximately do we have combined on is it 15,000 acres total ag? How much of our ag land is grazing land? How
Yeah.
many cattle do we have out there? What's happening?
Yeah, a big percentage. So we lease the 16,000 acres. 10,000 of that is native upland dry range land. That's all grazed. And then we have another 4,000 or so that is hayfield, that is also grazed at some point. That is typically in the off season, although we are trying to work with our producers to have some more summer grazing for regenerative purposes in some of the hayfield scenarios. And then there's another 1,000 or so that's irrigated pasture that's only grazed. Think of the tallgrass areas along South Boulder Creek, for example. A lot of that is irrigated, but grazing land only. I think at a peak, we have somewhere around 1,500 cattle grazing on open space in one place or another.
Do you think that over time we'll be able to expand to hit capacity and have the majority of the cattle using this technology, or the majority of the farmers using the technology, or what is the vision for that? For
Yeah,
adapta-
good
for
question.
adoption?
You know, we've piloted it. I think I worked with Mike Foster at Boulder County Parks and Open Space. They have some excitement around it. And originally, we kind of had a vision where the city and county would provide the towers, like for vents, we would set up the tower system, and then the producers would jump on that system and buy the collars and pay the collar fees. So, you know, broadly, that would be a goal, is for a city and county to partner on that bigger system. And yeah, I think we are finding that some of our more tech savvy producers are really excited about it. So I would think that we'll get broader adoption in the future.
Yeah, it's expensive to feed a cow, and especially with dairy, there's diminishing returns over the season in terms of the amount of milk, and they're trying to figure out the simple math of how much cheese to make, how much yogurt, how to conserve, how to get all of their co-op members showing up. I did Golden Hoof Co-op for many years, and I just switched over to a Jacob Springs Farm Co-op, and they're just the milk and the dairy products are incredible, and the meats are incredible. And I'm very familiar with Grandma's Grass too. These are all phenomenal regenerative farmers who are actually exemplars in the whole country, and they're doing great things. So, and that being said, it is already pretty expensive for them. So these the high tech collars is a big ask. What is the price approximate? What is the cost of these towers and the collars?
The the towers are 12,000 a piece. But we were like, with the city and county, a system may need to be like 4 towers. So between both entities, you know, it'd be in that 48,000, I guess, neighborhood for that. There is an annual, the collars themselves through vents are $100. That's a one-time fee to
That's
own
not
the
bad.
collar. And there's a $40 annual fee. So that's for their cloud system to manage the information for you.
Per collar.
Yes.
Yeah, great.
The halter system is pretty similar. Their annual fee is $70. Their base stations are a little bit cheaper at $4,500. And then both systems, of course, the collars have a battery. With the vents system, you have to change that battery once every year. That's $10. And I think the halter, they expect them to last 3 years. They have a little bit of they have a solar panel that helps charge the battery to keep them charged up.
Uh-huh. Okay. It's really interesting to think about how this could be applied across the system and the costs of that, and offset subsidizing and offsetting with the farmers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So just a quick follow-up, Andy. The costs that you were just quoting, are those borne by the tenants, by the actual farmers, or are those borne by our system?
Right now, we're funding as a pilot. We're funding. We grant funded the project. Yeah, and we're funding it to try to get adoption. And presumably, if we get adoption, then we can hand off the annual fees and the collar fees down the road.
So is there a sense that for a farmer, it makes sense to pay for these collar fees because maybe they won't have to spend money on fence maintenance? Are they going to get the money back some way?
Yeah, that presumably there's a lot of labor savings for
Mhm.
not, particularly in those strip grazing scenarios and those block grazing scenarios, they don't have to go out there and physically place that fence every day. They can simply change the boundary,
Mhm.
not have the labor to do it. I think it's more common in some of the bigger allotments in Western Colorado, and those producers are finding it to be a great product, and it's saving them a lot of time in temporary fencing. Once the system is also being used, the system will notify the livestock owner, like if a collar does not move for a certain period of time,
Mhm.
or if a cow is out, they see that on there and, you know, they can, it would help
Go find it.
prevent an accident
Yeah.
perhaps.
Yeah. So I can imagine a scenario where we develop a base map, kind of like what Kat was showing, where you've got a wetland and it's got a buffer. And, you know, so we buffer, you know, we create these no-go zones on our base map for the trails, for the wetlands, for the cultural resources, for the trails, you know, whatever that we're trying to, you know, keep cows off of because they have open space values that go beyond agriculture. Do we have such a map? And if you're part of the program, does that sort of automatically come with your set of collars? So for your property, the property you're leasing, they're never going to be able to walk over and
Right.
graze next to White Rocks, for example, or something like that.
Yeah, I think we could provide, you know, the particular resource information or work with the tenants to make those maps. There would be some caution in riparian areas might be very tough.
I
if-
could imagine that
if
could
it's
be
a really
contentious if the
desirable
cows are used
area,
to drinking there, for
Yeah.
example.
If it's super desirable, or what our representative had told us is, if it's very desirable, it could still be very tough to keep livestock out of there. So
Mhm.
we may still have to have
Oh,
some.
so it's not just getting the farmer to agree to the no-go zone, but the cows will just go.
Right. Some do, some do. We've heard it's about 90%
Okay.
compliance. So that's why, like, we would never get rid of boundary fencing, for example. We would be using this for interior fencing.
Mm, mm.
And, you know, I think for some cattle, it's just hard to understand. There's no visual cue to what's happening. They could,
Why am I feeling this
yeah.
buzz on my neck?
So yes, it like for a linear trail, for example, it would greatly reduce, if there's 90% compliance, it would greatly reduce the amount of time, the amount of, the number of cattle on that trail. So yeah, we're excited about some of those opportunities.
So one final thought, maybe you should suggest to Vince that they disguise those GPS things as cowbells so that cows don't know they're wearing a GPS
There you go.
transceiver. Yeah, that'll be good. Did you want to come back? Yeah.
This is a separate, or do we have any plans for grazing on Sanitas in the Sanitas area, or is that just too tight in there?
As far as fuels mitigation or
Yeah,
just as fuel?
cows meets fuels mitigation. Like this is, you know, the nexus of my two favorite topics.
Yeah, it obviously it wasn't scheduled for 2025. I am not sure if Paul has got a targeted grazing for 2026. We are doing a big uncow fuels mitigation work over on the Academy property in the Sanitas area. So we've got a number of WUI projects in plan for that area, but I'm not familiar with any targeted grazing there yet.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any conversation there yet.
The cows that I was visiting, that I was with this week they are a hybrid Alpine Jersey cow, and they're from Switzerland. And so they had been out all summer on a private property and then were being brought back here to Boulder. But they're able to graze and to navigate the hills quite well. And it was such a treat to learn about that. So my first thought was like, I had this idea of seeing the cows up there when I'm going up Sanitas, kind of along the hillside, just like we're in Switzerland or something. I thought it'd be cool.
Yeah. It's similar to terrain to the Wonderland Lake, where we did a 20-acre graze up on the hillside behind Wonderland. So not too somewhat unfamiliar with that. Yeah, similar.
Oh, Michelle.
I was just thinking about this vibrating collar and my cattle dog who will do it anyway. Like we tried, is like, no, I'm going for that. Forget about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm curious more about the economics. Like, have you run just the business case for them? I know right now you're piloting it, you're subsidizing it, but like, what is the sweet spot? Is it actually feasible for for the, like, if, you know, where's the break even point for them? You know, is it 6 years or, you know, because they also have to think about their own livelihood. So I just wonder if you done the back of the envelope math and like looked at what the target size would be that it would work for someone.
I haven't been in that conversation. I can try to provide that. I know Ryan Middleton has been working with our events representative most closely, and I'm sure they've demonstrated or run through the business case with them individually. I have heard from the Halter representative that a herd size of about 50 is what they believe is cost effective. So based on their system, produces over 50 head, can make it work financially.
Uh, Thank you for the presentation, Andy. I think it's really great we're deploying this technology. And it just tickles me that someone has a computer somewhere where they can see where all the cows are right now on the system.
All right. Well,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much, Andy. That was awesome. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Andy. All right, I think I'm gonna wrap it up for matters from the department by just a few quick verbal updates. Some of you may know through press releases and actually physically going out, but the Chapman Trailhead is officially opened and functioning. And I had the privilege of going there on Friday and just sitting on a rock and listening to people go by. And there was genuine excitement about like, oh, wow. I mean, first like, look at this. I've been hearing about it, been reading about it. And it was also, there was some question about whether or not it was actually needed from an infrastructure standpoint. I just happened to be there right around 3 o'clock on a Friday. And the venue next door was having an event. And it was like peak time to be out on a bike and doing it. And the amount of bikes crossing the new non-motorized bridge and the amount of traffic coming in and out of that site, to me, it was like, okay, that's why we did this. And it was great because the bicyclists didn't even have to think twice, as far as where they're going. And the trailhead itself is pretty cool. And utilizing the idea of the horse trailer parking along the turnaround route rather than taking up existing spaces within the parking lot. So a lot of cool things going on out there. Encourage you all to get out there and just kind of take a peek at it. With that, Saw Hill grand reopening is October 19th. It's a Sunday from 9:30 to noon. That's open to the public. We're hoping to have family and kids out there. So just a little bit of a plug. I know all of you have been out there, but if you're interested in participating in that, encourage you to get out there on the 19th. And yeah, just if you're following our prescribed grazing projects, we are in Dakota Ridge. Andy Breiter brought 104 cattle in those little 2-acre temporary fencing enclosures, and that's now completed. And we are doing another round of fall grazing, prescribed grazing on tall oak grass at Shanahan Ridge. So a lot going on there. And then we have a nice WUI's projects that commenced in back of the Academy property. If you're just interested in kind of finding out, looking at an ongoing project and seeing the work that's going on, that's sort of where we're at right now. And yeah, we announced the prescribed burn open. Of course, we need the conditions to sort of match all of that in terms of our hopes and dreams of putting on a landscape level burn this fall. But so keep our fingers crossed that the good rains we had is behind us for just a little bit to allow things to dry out a little bit in order to get that prescribed burn on the ground, but still hoping for that. So yeah, with that, that's matters from the department.
Hey, Dan, thanks for that. During matters from the board, I neglected to mention to the board that we are going to have a city council letter due this year. I think it was December 19th that it's going to be due to council. So, that is one thing that we should spend a little bit of time working on. And I think by next meeting, we'll put an agenda item on just to have a discussion about that and what we think are our priorities based on the format that council secretary provided to us. So we'll let you know about that in the upcoming meetings.
Great.
Okay. Thanks, Dan. And thanks to everybody who came to visit us tonight. It was great to see your faces out there, staff, members of the public. Really appreciate it. I'm going to call this meeting adjourned.